Happy holiday everyone! Today let's paint this festive Christmas themed catgirl. Don't ask me the link between catgirls and Christmas, I don't know either. Anyway, I found this cute catgirls model, which is perfectly suited for the holiday season. This model was designed by the Dark Penguin, who is my personal source for anything catgirls related. But enough talking, let's paint. Here's our printed and primed model. I've also added this gift as basing bits. For the color scheme, I base it on the Dark Penguin artworks of this model, and a white priming works perfectly for this scheme. I will start with the skin, which is quite fair, so I begin by base coating it with a medium skin tone. To get a good coverage without losing details, I applied the base coat, pinned with a bit of water in 3 pieces. Once the skin base is done, I apply a flesh shade all over the base coat, then wipe the excess with a cotton bud. These cotton bud steps may seem very subtle, but it really smooths out the skin's shading. With the shade dry, I'm going to highlight the skin, but I want to keep it smooth and anime looking, so instead of layering, I glaze it. For this, I repaint the volume using my medium skin tone. Dilute with water until it's very thin but not a wash. I apply it on the raised areas, like the hips, nose and belly, avoiding the recesses to slowly build up the highlight. I do the same with my second lighter skin tone. I dilute it and apply it on the raised areas to keep building the highlight. And I go back and forth between this paint and the previous one until I'm satisfied. So yes, here are my tips to glaze properly. Avoiding the recesses. Since the paint is very thin, it can easily flow into them and ruin the volume building. Work slowly by building the skin tone gradually. Because the paints are diluted, you need to let each layer dry to see the result. And don't hesitate to play with different mixes, going back and forth between your colors until you're satisfied. My finishing touches are to lightly layer the most prominent areas of the skin, like the ribs, nose and abdominal muscle, with an even paler skin tone. In the end, it was time consuming, but it gives the skin a very smooth finish, which works perfectly for an anime style miniature. And the skin being one of the main parts of the mini, it was important to work more on it. I'll save the face for later. Now I'm moving on to the clothes, starting with the red section of the outfit. I'm beginning by applying a dark red base coat all over the fabric, being careful not to go over the skin. After all the work I've done, I don't want to ruin it. Once the base is settled, I'll shade it with a red wash to define the fold of the clothing. Now that we have a nice dark base, I move on to more classic highlighting. I start by layering a deep rich red over all the red areas to set the main tone of the fabric. Then I define the folds and red areas with a vibrant red to make them more colorful. You can already see how rich the red fabric looks. And to finish it, I'll mix some of the previous red with a bright orange to layer the most prominent folds, which really sharpens them. With the red fabrics done, I move on to the black leather elements. So I'm painting with a bluish black, the boots, the belt, the gloves and the top. As always, I'm being careful, since I'm working close to finished sections. Then I will apply on them a dark shade. This shade will be followed by a layer of a deep grey to define the volume. Then a deep blue is layered to add some tint, so they don't end up as a simple black but something richier. I'll use a medium grey to pick out the most prominent edges, clearly defining the black areas from the model. Now I'll move on to the white sections, which are the stocking and the fur of the outfit. I'm starting with an off-white base coat on these, being careful not to go over the red fabric. I'll also paint the hair and the tails with it, even though we're not going to work on them right now. With this base done, I'm applying a grey wash to the stocking and fur. making sure it dries without any pooling. Then I glaze the stocking with their base coat to define the volume and make the highlight smoother. Now I'm moving on to a bright white, which will be used for two things. First, I finish the stocking by glazing them in two pieces, focusing on the knees and calves. Secondly, I'm dotting the fur to create a cotton-like texture, which is simple but works nicely. Now I'm moving on to her bag and ribbons. Those one are greens on the artwork. So I start with a base coat of a medium deep green over all the mentioned parts. I'm using a larger brush for the bag, but I switch to a smaller one when working on the ribbons to avoid going over what I've already painted. To define their volume and darken them a little, I apply a green shade over them. Watch out for the fold when applying the shade, it can easily pull into them. For the highlight I will only use layering, because I want sharp highlight on the bag. I start by layering with a light green all the edges, including the folds of the bag and ribbons, as well as the edges of the gift we can see inside the bag. And with an even paler green, I define the sharpest edges, such as where the folds meet or the corner of the gifts pushing through the bag. The last things left are the drawstring and the lines drawn on the part the catgirl's holding. I simply paint those with a vibrant red. And while I'm at it, I paint the candy cane with the same color. With the bag finished, I complete the candy cane by painting with some bright white their typical pattern. Now I'm going to paint the shiny wrapping on the gifts. I'm keeping it simple for these. I start with a light silver paint all over the wrapping. Once the metallic base settled, I play with different contrast or speed paint to give each gift a vibrant color. I don't really want to overthink this step, just like that it works well. I'll move on to the gold details, such as the ribbon on the gift, and the catgirl's belts and belt buckle. I simply base coat these with a gold paint, then apply a brownish shade over them, and I highlight those with a light gold to define the folds of the ribbons and the edges of the belts and buckles. We're close to finishing the model. I'm moving on to the hair and tail, which, based on the artwork, they are very pale, almost icy cold blue. I've already base coated these in white, so now I'm applying a cold blue wash over them to set the main color and shading. I still define the highlight, first using a mix of 1/3 bright blue and white, following the flow of the hair and the tails. Then with a pure white, I pick out a few edges of the hair to give it a more icy look. Finally, I move on to her face, starting with the lips. First, I define them with a 50-50 mix of flesh tone and pink. It's subtle but useful to set their tone. Then I carefully shade the lips with a red wash. When doing this, we want to apply very little of paint, to avoid making the mouth too large. I finish the model by painting her eyes, starting by painting them black. Then I add a white dot in the middle. You can see how the black helps define the outline of the eyes. And last, I dot the iris in red, followed with a white dot for the reflection. And here's our Christmas catgirl finished. I know we've just passed Christmas, but I hope this video reaches you before the new year, keeping it within the holiday season. I'm very happy to have followed the Dark Penguin's artwork for the color scheme, as it looks really nice in the end, and I've given her a very simple snow base, but it complements the model well. Thank you very much for watching my last video of 2025. I wish you all a happy new year, and all the best for 2026. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a like. Also, feel free to leave a comment below. Well, farewell. It was Clemoniak and I'll see you next time.